podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the 1905 podcast. Each week, Joe and I bring you our unfiltered takes on the highs, the lows, and everything in between, following the Blues from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes. Another Wembley Cup final, another Chelsea defeat. 7 in a row. And, this luck has to turn, doesn't it? And I'm going to call it luck to a point because, yet again, I've woken up this morning, rewatched the highlights, and still can't quite believe that we didn't get a penalty in that game. And I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a second. The lineups came out, wasn't massively dissimilar to what Joe and I had kind of predicted and asked for before the game. I think the one big perhaps surprise was that Reece James started in midfield, in place of Andre Santos, but actually it was quite similar really to the lineup that Chelsea played against Paris Saint-Germain last summer, wasn't it, in terms of that setup? So you can kind of see why Callum McFarlane kind of went for that approach that we saw Maresca use so successfully at times. And we didn't start great, and City were very dominant, weren't they, for the first half an hour or so, and you were kind of, it's a classic City game, just waiting for a chance. But we grew into the game, and I'm not sure about everyone else, but almost, I think going into the game, we were all probably not expecting a huge amount. We're obviously very much underdogs with the form that City are in and the way we've been playing. But as we grew into the game, almost about an hour in, I was like, well, this is really there for us, isn't it? We were the better side, I thought, for the last part of the first half and the start of the second half. And I really thought at that point, if Chelsea can get the goal, we could win this. And my nerves kind of were ramping up as the game went on. And there was the one moment of magic from Semenyo wins the game. And really, in open play, if you were to criticise Chelsea, they just didn't create enough, did we? I will come on to the penalties. I think they have to be talked about. But in terms of really creating chances and getting shots away, we just didn't quite do enough. And probably the best chance, or certainly the best chance we had of the game was that Enzo Fernandez chance just after Semenyo had scored. Good for the con from Colwill, and he does it right, Enzo. He does the right thing. He just got to try and keep it down. And when that goes over, and then we didn't really create anything in terms of actual chances going into the later stage of the game, which was disappointment. It's really disappointing. The thing that I kind of came away thinking about, and I've talked about this before, I think when we've lost cup finals, is that through the history of Chelsea Cup finals, bar a couple, in all of my time supporting the club, they have been really tight games. It's often the case in the cup final, isn't it? It's tight. Teams don't want to give too much away, and I always think the big players and big moments win finals. It's so often the case, and Chelsea had no one better than that in Didier Drogba. Over the years, his record at Wembley was obviously incredible. His ability to turn up in the big moments and just get you a goal in those games. And if you look back and watch many of those finals in Didier's time at the club, Chelsea often weren't necessarily much the better side, probably a little bit like Man City today, to be fair. But Drogba would come up with something, or Lampard would. It would be those kind of guys. The era before that, it was actually Di Matteo. I grew up being one of my favourite players for that reason. Roberto Di Matteo would turn up at Wembley and score a goal. Zola in the Cup Winners' Cup final. Those big moments in tight games where someone steps up and, smashes one in, and you're like, right. And then actually, defensively, you can keep it secure and win the cup, which is what it's all about. And we just didn't have anyone to do that. And you're probably looking at the likes of João Pedro and Cole Palmer on the day thinking, can you create something special for us? And they just didn't really get the moment to do that, which was disappointing. And then once again, the subs that you make, they just made us worse, didn't they? Actually, they're all the subs that you would make. They made sense to get Liam Delap on, to get Garnacho on, in particular, but it doesn't make you a better side. Unfortunately, it made us worse, and we were almost more toothless as those guys came on the pitch. Oh, the penalty decisions. Watching real time, I was like, oh, let's go through them. I thought the two that I think worth the most conversation, the João Pedro one in the first half and the Hato one in the second half. The João Pedro one in the first half, at first glance, you kind of get Kusanov's kind of come across him. It's a bit of a shoulder to shoulder. You're probably not going to get that. Watching it back this morning, it's a disgrace. It's a knee across knee. He's basically wiped him out with his leg. And how that hasn't had a proper review, I don't know. For me, it's a penalty. And then in the second half, what was it, late in the game, Hato goes through, does really well, shows his pace, Hato, gets in behind Kusanov, and Kusanov wipes him out from behind. And again, at first glance, I think in real time, you're looking at it again, oh yeah, it's a bit of a coming together. You probably won't get that. You watch it back, again, how VAR hasn't come in and stepped in and gone, that's a penalty. I just don't know. There are a couple of other little shouts like the handball and stuff like that, but I think you're less likely to get those things. But in my mind, those two, having watched them back again today, are a disgrace. And Pep Guardiola, the referees and VAR under a bit of pressure before the game, saying that he lost the last two finals because of bad refereeing. And you just look at that and think, does sometimes who you've got in the dugout make a difference? If we've got a Mourinho there against Guardiola, does it? Do you have? You're less likely to get out into a big headline, are you, with Callum McFarlane coming out saying he was a bit disappointed with the referee decision versus a real big name manager? And I just wondered if that affected it in any way. I think these things do. I think we've had it go in our favour in the past, where we've had big managers who are able to influence the referees, or big players like John Terry, Frank Lampard, etc. But he just added to the long list of really bad referee decisions that have gone against us throughout this course of 7 finals. There's so many examples of it. I mentioned a couple of them in the preview to the final, thinking our luck has got to change at some point, from Lukaku offsides against Liverpool, the Leicester game where Tillman's, there's the handball, and then the Chilwell goal was disallowed. Was it handball against Martinez when he was in goal for Arsenal? There's just so many examples in literally every single one of these games where something has gone against us. And Joe had said it in the sort of preview to the game that if we are to win it, we're going to need things to go our way. A little bit like, I think you mentioned the one Palace last year where Henderson wasn't sent off when many thought he could have been. And I think in a game like this against City, when you are the underdogs, you do need those things to go your way. And once again, for Chelsea at Wembley, it just hasn't. And that was gutting. And to be honest, I was probably more gutted, I think, last night than I thought I would be. I think going into it, I was pretty pessimistic, probably like we all were. But because we played pretty well and we're in the game, and it was such a tight margins again. Almost, I think I might have preferred to lose 3-0 emotionally. We were never in the game anyway, but we were there in it. And if it wasn't for a couple of tight calls, we could have come away with a cup. And obviously the season feels very different, doesn't it? But yeah, really disappointed. Enough in it for being positive to say that you can see there is a squad of players there that have started to play again. Where they were for the best course of a couple of months, I don't know. But I'll hand over to Joe at that point, and I'll be back later to talk about the one really good news that did come from Saturday, which is our new manager from Spain. Who can believe it? But we'll talk about that later. Joe, over to you.
Yes, hello and welcome in. I think Chris and I were hoping to come on here with a story of triumph and ecstasy in a Chelsea victory for the ages against a rampant Man City, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. If I start with the game just as a whole and say that the players performed well, and I was very pleased with their performance. I was happy with the way we played and the way we got into Man City, didn't let them settle, and made life terribly difficult for them. I think that's where Chris and I have been very upset by the way that the team has just folded this year. Any team can have a poor game, maybe a poor couple of matches, but the way that you can see this Chelsea team perform against one of the best teams of all time, really. And then go about their business against all the other sides and perform the way they have, it just makes you angry, it makes you cross, it makes you just kind of pissed off with the way that they have treated the fan base this year, with contempt. And I just think that shouldn't be forgotten. They look embarrassed. I think that there's some of them have looked embarrassed, particularly after defeats prior to the cup final. And they should be. I think the players should hang their heads in shame. I think when you see what they can do and how they can perform and how much effort they can give, and I would question even the fact that Chelsea's formation perhaps didn't work under Liam Rosenior. Now, whatever happened with him, I'm not too interested. What I would say is this. There is no way, even with a manager as poor as Liam Rosenior, that we couldn't have gone on to win certain matches, or certainly not lose certain matches, to put ourselves in this position. If you don't lose at Brighton, they don't gain 2 extra points on you or 3 extra points on you. So it's a difficult one for me to stomach, and I'm trying to sort of steer away from too much negativity on this voice note, because obviously it was a cup final that we played well in, and yes, Chris is right, all those things that went against us maybe yesterday, I think a few of them were debatable. I think a lot of this stuff that happens outside the box, you don't often tend to see inside the box. And I think the grey areas of those things are never going to go away from the game. I think that ultimately, Chris is right, we just weren't clinical enough in the Man City box. And that's the way it was. Lenzo Fernandez did have our best chance, more than likely. And I think it was actually a very good chance. I think it's better than maybe a 50% chance. I think he should do a lot better there. And I think anywhere on goal, I think he probably scores. He's that close. So, yeah, very, very difficult. I think if we were going to get back into the game, it was going to be at that moment when the flick on from Levi Colwill happens and Inter finds himself right there just to Topo get home, but sadly lifted it over the bar. What I would say about Chelsea yesterday, and what I've seen with them with Callum McFarland, particularly against Man City earlier in the season and then Liverpool last week, I'm going to take out the Nottingham Forest performance because I think it was probably an anomaly. Callum McFarland has set up the team in a way that he's gone, right, I need to get arguably my best 11 football players that are fit on the field. And how do I go about that? Do I just rip up the rule book and play a random formation? Do I just try and shoehorn them into a 4-4-2, 4-5-1, 4-3-2-1 or whatever? But no, he didn't. He came up with his own formation. He moved people into what I would class as their more natural areas of the field. And lo and behold, Chelsea's performances have gone up. And the players seem to quite like Callum McFarland, it seems. They're playing for him. And yeah, I mean, that's why you got the response you did against Liverpool and you got the response against Man City yesterday. But as professionals, does it take, maybe Xabi Alonso or a new manager to look at the squad from afar, knowing that he's watching your every performance and game, to get any type of performance? So the fact that we went to Anfield and played very well and could have won the game quite comfortably, and obviously playing yesterday against Man City, there was only one team really going to win it, in my opinion, and that was Chelsea. They were the far better side. They looked more hungry. They looked more aggressive in the tackle. They were up for the game much more than City were, and all from a touch of class from Semenyo. I don't think Man City even looked like scoring yesterday, to be honest with you. I think only one real chance I can remember, which was Semenyo right at the start of the second half. But other than that, I don't really think they were in the game. So why does it take our players to suddenly show up when you realise that there's a new manager watching you and he might want to pick you for next season or whatever? I just find that bit all too frustrating. It's a too familiar story. I think with Chelsea, and there's a few clubs like this, but I think with Chelsea in particular, as a fan base, as an ownership model, players, I think we all have got, unfortunately, too addicted to the idea that we're not a very good side anymore and we're not good enough to compete at the highest level. But that does stem from the players, and it stems from seasons now, constant seasons of not beating a bigger side on a regular basis. That's 14 defeats in a row now, I believe, against Man City, which is remarkable. And I think the longer these runs go on, you just start saying, and the players start believing that they're not good enough to win these matches. It doesn't matter what personnel comes in. It's a bit like the Tottenham thing with Chelsea. I think they've had 1 or 2 victories in about 30 years or something. It's mad. So it gets ingrained in your psyche that you're not good enough to win the big match. And I think the longer that Chelsea go on with this horrendous kind of approach to these bigger matches and the way they go about them is going to hurt us forevermore if we don't get somebody who is willing to go toe-to-toe with these managers and say that, you know what, we are good enough to compete with you and we are good enough to beat you and we're going to show you that. And with our new appointment, hopefully he can change the tide on that. But I think we all, sadly, like Chris said in his voice note earlier on, I've heard lots of Chelsea fans say it up and down the country about our performance yesterday and before the game, that we were pessimistic about winning the game. We didn't think we would win because we've been suppressed by it for so long that any big team that we play against now, we just don't have the confidence, even as a fan base, to kind of go, yeah, we can do this, we can nick this. And yeah, that's how it played out yesterday. I felt as though for all the good that we did, and we did do a lot of good, we snapped into tackles, we created some really good little chances, but we never quite, when it came to the crunch, we never quite executed the final shot to kind of put any pressure on Trafford. You know, he's a standing goalkeeper. Bear in mind, he's a good goalie, but Donnarumma was on the bench. You know, we didn't test him. I don't think we really gave him any shots to save at all. Can anyone remember? If you can, please email in. But I don't remember a chance that he actually had to save. Enzo's shot obviously went over the bar, and there was one or two other chances. You know, João Pedro got into a really good position in the first half and then fell over. And again, that's one thing that wound me up yesterday. And Chris has alluded to this before. All these modern pitches now, they're soaking wet. They're carpets, but they're soaking wet. They're wet so the ball can run on them really nicely. And I looked at him when he fell over for about the fourth or fifth time yesterday, and he was just wearing a pair of standard moulded studs. And I just thought, wow, in any game of football in the Premier League, I'd be wearing a hybrid boot of moulded and studs, or purely just wear studs. But yeah, I found that an incredible decision for a striker of his calibre to not be wearing the correct footwear. And people might say, he fell over. You don't fall over 5 times in a cup final when you've got a good chance to win. Part of your job is to be ready. Okay, and in my opinion, João Pedro, as well as he played yesterday, he had an excellent game. I'm very pleased with him. But sadly, the wrong footwear has cost him, I think, two or three occasions where he could have got a shot away. He couldn't because he fell over. And that's on the player. And I think that's unprofessional, quite frankly. And it's those small margins that will set you in good stead for the game. And yeah, very disappointed in that front yesterday with João Pedro. But his overall performance was great and his season's been excellent. So I'm not going to come on here and call him out, but I thought that not having the right footwear on was poor. If I go quickly towards the game and the formation, the lineup, I think it was great to see Reece in midfield. I think it gave us a real bite with Caicedo. Enzo pushed further forward, obviously alongside Cole Palmer kind of thing. It looked, the balance looked right. It looked like a good team. Then you look back at the defence and you go, okay, Fofana has now looked very good alongside Levo Colwill, but unfortunately I think it's too late in the day for you to save your Chelsea career. He still looks leggy to me, and as you saw in the second half, when Chelsea were chasing the game a little bit, Fofana was the one that they were getting at 1v1, and he was chasing a lot of shadows in the second half there towards the end. But I'm sorry, you can't play a season like you've just had and expect Chelsea fans to be like, oh yeah, but I played 2 good games against Liverpool, Man City. No, I'm sorry, mate, it doesn't work that way. And sadly, I think you need to be gone from this football club. But good game yesterday from him. Levi, again, was immense, absolutely immense. Did not deserve to be on the losing side. And even for the goal that Semenyo scores, he does everything correct. As a defender, you can't legislate for someone doing something magic. And Levi gets himself in the best position. He's tight as he can be. And Semenyo manages to get that little back flick into the bottom corner. So nothing you can do about that. And Levi was amazing yesterday. I mean, I can't believe how good the guy is. And I knew he was good before he got injured. I think we were all kind of pleased with the way he was developing at Chelsea. But yesterday was a real eye-opener. And even though he played well against Liverpool, coming up against Haaland and Semenyo and Mamouche and all the rest of it, yeah, just awesome. And so grateful that he's back in this Chelsea blue and looks like someone who wants to stay and be there, which is even better. Hato was wonderful again, up and down the field. And if Chelsea do, and by the sounds of it, Alonso does like to play this back three, Hato in that sort of defensive third there, left of the threes, just looks so compact, so competent. He gets up, he gets down, he's got a great vision, great pass on him, he can cross the ball. We've seen he can shoot, he can score a great goal as well. Again, defensively really sound and only going to get better and better. I think he is one for the future, a real bright spot for Chelsea in a pretty doom and gloom season. I thought Malo Gusto probably had his best game for a long time. He still made a few mistakes. But certainly because it was a cup final and a showpiece game, he looked like he got up for the match. And again, another one like Fofana. Unfortunately, he's had so many poor games this season. When you've needed people to step up and be that player, they went the other way and decided to kind of throw the towel in. So sadly for me, there's no reprieve. But I have to say, Malo Gusto yesterday was up and down the field. He travelled well. A couple of times we got in good positions in the attacking third, and he does just kind of put the ball into an absolutely dead spot where there's nobody, or the cross is too low or too weak. Unlike a Reece who can whip a ball into anyone, anywhere, anytime, Malo Gusto, you just feel as though he is just hoping for the best. And yeah, I think as a defender he did pretty well, but as an attacking force, maybe not as good as he could be. Again, Caicedo was very, very good. He seems to have got a bit of hunger back for the game. Some energy levels seem to have come back to him in the last game or two. Maybe that's because the manager's gone. Maybe there was just a disconnect between him and Rosenior and the players. It's quite possible. But again, he looks like someone that is ready to kind of fight for the badge. And again, he just signed a new contract, so fingers crossed that our new manager can get him playing. As for the attacking third, I think Cole Palmer was decent without being massively effective. I thought he had a good game on the ball. He was neat and tidy. He managed to kind of find pockets of space. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Cole. I think he had a decent game, but there's just something lacking from him. And I hope that the new manager can get something out of him. But at the moment, I think he's had a dreadful season. There's no getting away from it. Yes, it's been injury-ridden at times. And I think we definitely have to take that into consideration. But he does seem to be refusing shots now. There was a couple of times, edge of the box yesterday, near the end, when we had a chance for him to whip it into the left-hand corner, which he would have done, 18 months ago. But again, he just looks for the pass, and it's an easy option now. Where's that kind of free spirit gone? He seems to have he's definitely playing within himself, I think, when it comes to that. And as a striker or as a forward player, you've got to be the one that is leading by example and almost taking the responsibility to go out there and actually put your stamp all over the game and make Trafford make a save. Because if I was the Chelsea manager yesterday, the one criticism I would have was that we never tested him. And I know I said that earlier on, but we didn't. We never tested the goalkeeper. Sting his palms, let's see what he's got. It's an FA Cup final for him. Is he nervous? Let's get at him for the first 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. Can we get a few shots away? Put a few corners under his nose. Really test him out. But sadly, we didn't do that, and we looked for the easy option too many times, and we kept passing it across their back line, and then chance would end up fizzling out. João Pedro and Enzo Fernandez, I thought, were excellent. They really worked hard for the team. They were the ones, if we were going to score, it seemed like it was going to come from them. But like I say, João Pedro, a couple of times when he was about to shoot, just fell over. And Enzo, who I thought was probably actually arguably our best player alongside Levo Colwell, I think. And there's a few shouts for some other players too, and I think they would be acceptable. But I think that Enzo was one that was the real driving force, and if we were going to score a goal, he was certainly one of the ones it was going to come from, and always puts himself in a dangerous position. I think if he does end up leaving the club, which I don't think he will, but if he does end up leaving the club, we will miss his goals. I think we will miss that kind of driving force from midfield. But I would like to see our new manager work with him. And you'll realise I'm saying new manager because we don't want to get into that conversation just yet. We're going to do that later on. But I want to see someone of his ilk work with Enzo Fernandez and see what he can do and add to his game. And I think it's a very exciting prospect if Chelsea can keep all their players and not have to sell people due to the fact that they've overspent a lot of money in the last few years. As Chris mentioned, Liam Delap came on, and I wanted to weep a little bit, and I did say basically we're down to 10 men now, and then Garnacho came on and we went down to 9 men. So it goes to show the level of talent that we have coming off the bench, and that £70 million worth of talent coming on and makes us look absolutely bang average. The one thing that frustrated the most about Liam Delap is we've seen it all season long, and a friend of Chris's spoke to us at the start of the season, who I think he's an Ipswich fan, and he said, what you'll realise with Delap is he's not very bright, and he will give someone a two-hand push in the back. When you've just built up a load of pressure, he goes in and two-hand pushes somebody and relieves all that pressure. Well, there was a chance yesterday where the ball was bouncing around in the box and he came running up from nowhere and he pushed 2 defenders right in the back, right on the 6-yard box, and gave Man City a free kick in their 6-yard box, and all Chelsea's pressure evaporated. And sadly, he hasn't learned. He doesn't seem to be learning. And again, another player that is frustrating the living crap out of me. And it's a hard one to Delap, because part of you wants to say, let's give him another season, let's see if a new manager can get something out of him. But at the moment, it just seems to be that he doesn't seem to be learning, and he's pretty dim when it comes to giving fouls away and and taking the pressure off other teams when we've got them what we want them. So again, another disappointing game from him. Garnacho didn't touch the ball, I don't think, when he came on. So again, complete waste of time, sadly. And overall, it ended up being Man City 1, Chelsea 0. But I will say this, I think Chelsea thoroughly deserved more. I think they were, even though we didn't create tons of real clear-cut one-on-one chances, they were the far better side. They played the best football. They were in the game way more than they were. We fizzled out with 10 minutes to go when the subs came on and our legs started to go. But I think overall, we should be very pleased with the performance yesterday. I think the season as a whole will now fizzle out pretty poorly. You know, there's a chance we beat Spurs because it's a game we do tend to win. But I just think that when it's all said and done, the ownership group, by releasing the statement about the new manager today, was probably a good thing for them, because I think going into the next couple of games with this level of disappointment regarding the league form is going to cause a few ripples around the club. You know, the fact they spent all this money and they're going to finish anywhere from 9th to 13th in the next 2 games says all you need to know about the way they spent their money this year. And the decision-making of the managers and all the rest of it has been really, really poor. And yeah, it's going to be a disastrous campaign. You know, no trophies. Okay, an FA Cup final, but we didn't play anybody to get there. You know, you can't help that. That's just how that is. But I think if we were tested earlier on in the campaign, maybe we wouldn't have got this far. But I think that overall, I'm pleased with the game yesterday, the game plan. I was pleased with Callum McFarlane's tactics and formations and the way he set the team up. And yeah, he should hold his head up high. He's been nothing but fantastic for the football club in the short time he's been there. But in the end, he doesn't get you anything, and we go back to London with our tail between our legs. And a disappointing season is soon coming to an end, but Chris and I will be back in a moment to discuss the new manager and hopefully a bit of positivity on the horizon. Final score from Wembley: Man City 1, Chelsea 0.
We'll say his name, shall we? Xabi Alonso is the next Chelsea manager. And I can't quite believe it. I think it is an amazing appointment from the club. By far and away the best candidate that we could have dreamed of getting right now. And yeah, I'm buzzing. I mean, it's a really weird timing, isn't it? And clearly quite deliberate from the club to put it out straight after the cup final to kind of give everyone a bit of a boost. So it does feel weird, because obviously we spent the first half of this podcast talking about the fact that we're gutted about the cup final, clearly, and the way the season's finished. But we wanted to do it in 2 halves, this pod, because frankly, we wanted to give the cup final its due and talk about that and not get distracted by the Alonso news. But let's talk about Alonso now. And it really is an incredible appointment. And we're trying to think back to when I've been more excited about a Chelsea manager appointment. And it's a long, long time. It really is. I mean, there's been many an appointment. Something like a Tuchel, for example, was clearly, it turned out, an amazing appointment. But at the time, probably wasn't that excited and had some question marks. Maybe Frank Lampard, when he was appointed, maybe more from an emotional point of view when Frank joined. Obviously, he's my hero. So him coming to the club back in 2019 was a big moment like that. But yeah, it's right up there with some of the biggest appointments that we've made, I think. And clearly, everything I'm going to say in this pod, and Joe will as well, is done on the fact he hasn't played a game for Chelsea yet. Who knows how Alonso will do? All we can put out is what we think about the appointment and what the potential is of him as Chelsea manager. And perhaps that's a good place to start, because if those haven't seen it yet, he has not been appointed as head coach like every single Chelsea leader since Jose Mourinho back in 2013. He's the last Chelsea manager that was actually appointed manager. Everyone under Clear Lake has been appointed as a head coach or similar type position, but they've given Alonso the manager title. And from everything I've been reading about that today, it's a very deliberate point, a very deliberate statement from the club that Alonso will be more than just a coach, and Chelsea are learning their lessons, and he will be involved in decisions on and off the pitch. So there's so much to talk about there, but potentially so many positives that the club are listening to the fans and obviously the protests and all those kind of things, and are willing to admit that they've made mistakes. And I think that is really worth pausing on, because one of the biggest frustrations that we've all had as Chelsea fans, anyone who's listened to this podcast, I think, we're all thinking the same, aren't we? This squad needs a bit of experience. It needs some ready-made players. It needs a bit more mentality. And that is exactly what all of the sound bites coming out of the club right now are saying, that Chelsea are going to go out this summer. It sounds like there's going to be a significant outlay of players leaving the club, which is something that Joe and I will do a special on at the end of the season, as we always do, and talk about what our view on that would be. But we think it should be a decent clear out. It sounds like that is the plan, and Alonso will be a big part of that. And Chelsea are looking to bring in, the word I saw today was 2 or 3 ready-made starters. Age will not be a factor anymore in the signing of those players. And the phrase used, apparently, that Alonso used in the interview process is that he wants mentality monsters. And aren't all these, proof is in the pudding, etc., but aren't these exactly the kind of words and messages you want to hear coming out of the club right now? I mentioned this actually in the last pod, but I went back and listened to it. When Liam Rosenior was sacked, we obviously went through the short list of managers that at that point and looked at the bookies' odds and who we thought it would be. And Xabi Alonso's name came up very briefly from us, and I listened back to it, and we basically said, there's no way Alonso's going to come to Chelsea. He's either going to go to Liverpool or he's going to go to another top club. And Chelsea just aren't in the market anymore, unfortunately, for the likes of an Alonso. And that's why we were saying that perhaps we were shopping in this sort of market of an Iriola and a Glasner and Marco Silva. And again, not to disrespect those managers, by the way, because they've all done incredible jobs and are very, very good managers in their own rights, without a doubt. But the point we were making was that we felt that the Chelsea of old would have been looking to get a Xabi Alonso, someone who has gone to Germany, won the league with Dortmund, just played an incredible, at Leverkusen, not Dortmund, at Leverkusen, played an incredible style of football, had an unbeaten season there, won the cup double as well. Was incredible, wasn't it? I remember actually being kind of really intrigued by the season, looking in, and the amount of times that they'd score late to preserve that unbeaten record was incredible. And then obviously he went to Real Madrid, and again, I've sort of binged on Alonso this sort of today, watching some of the stuff about his time at Real Madrid. And again, you look at his record and it really wasn't bad. He had a little bit of a bad patch, but they were, I think, four points behind Barcelona, the leaders, when he was sacked. If that, it was very, very tight. And a fallout with a couple of players was all it took for him to be taken out. But a couple of very respected writers and people that I do look at their views on European football, so say to this point, to this day, it was one of the harshest sackings that they've seen. And obviously Real Madrid actually only got worse since he left. So I think what that experience will have done for him is probably hardened him up a little bit, and maybe knowing what Chelsea can be like and stuff that Joe talked about there in terms of character of players can only stand him in good stead, that experience, I think. But yeah, he comes into Chelsea and has the potential to really take us to the next level, I think. And I really hope this is the guy. I think Clearlake have wanted to find the guy. That's the thing you've heard from day one. They gave, when it was Potter, they wanted to give him a long contract to make him the guy to build around. It didn't work. They went to Pochettino, had the same view. They didn't quite get on. It didn't work. And then you've gone on to Maresca and then Liam Rosenior. And every time it's had this feeling they want to find someone young who they can sort of build a project around, and haven't found the right guy. Let's hope that with Xabi Alonso, who's only 44, is a young guy himself, we found the guy to build the next era of Chelsea around. And, he's obviously known in England for being a big Liverpool man. So it will be weird for a little while, but he looks like a Chelsea sort of manager, doesn't he? He's got that kind of swagger, that style. He looks like he looks like he'd smell nice, Xabi Alonso. He's just got that look about him, hasn't he? And strolling down the King's Road and being on the sideline at Stamford Bridge. Again, it's these are the small things that can be silly at times, but the great Chelsea managers have always had that aura, I think, about them. And with Xabi Alonso, I think there's a potential that he can do that. he'll walk in on day one when he comes to training, obviously in pre-season. He's going to have the respect of the players. He's won everything risen to the game. He can put his World Cup winning medal on there. He can put his Champions League winning medals down. And if you're a midfielder like an Enzo Fernandez, a Casado, etc., you're only going to look at him and go, yeah, I can learn a lot from this guy. I mean, he'd probably be the best passer at the club, won't he? In training, as soon as he comes in, it was such an incredible player. And there's been a little bit of talk. Oh, he's a Liverpool guy. Will the Chelsea fans take to him? I think we all know that that's nonsense. I think actually, he's spoken in incredibly high regard about that rivalry and playing against Frank Lampard during that era. And I think he's actually one of those players. There's certain players in other teams that you kind of don't like, aren't there? And you sort of dislike for whatever reason. You can all probably think of them right now. And there are certain players in other teams you just have a bit of a respect for. And I think Xabi Alonso always fell into that category, where you'd be like, God, he's a very good player. He's a pain in the arse for Chelsea at times, but yeah, he's a great player. And he was at Liverpool a good while, but then he obviously had really good spells at Real Madrid and Bayern Munich as well. I was trying to think actually this morning of like, who would be the equivalent sort of player in the Chelsea era that would maybe then end up managing Liverpool? And I was sort of thinking, someone like if a Michael Ballack had become a manager, someone like him maybe going to Liverpool as manager, where you sort of think he'd be naturally a Chelsea manager but ended up at Liverpool. It's kind of that. I think Ballack was at Chelsea for about 4 or 5 years. So pretty similar actually to Alonso's time at Liverpool. Was just a one club man in England, Alonso, like Ballack, which is why I was sort of like, it's a bit different to Fabregas because he was known as Arsenal and Chelsea, wasn't he? But yeah, either way, I don't think that will be any issues. And I saw my brother and my cousin today, a big family do, both big Liverpool fans. And frankly, they were just a bit gutted and couldn't quite believe that Liverpool hadn't gone for him. I think they were a bit fed up with Slot. And it just felt a shoo-in that if they'd gone in for him, that they would have got him. But Chelsea have got their timing just right on this. We've probably got a bit of luck as well that the manager market was as such that Carrick had ended up staying at United. Liverpool, it looks like they want to give Slot a bit longer. And it's just opened up for us really, really nicely. So yeah, very, very exciting. There'll be a lot of talk, and Joe alluded to it a little bit earlier, without saying his name, which I thought was very funny. And there'll be talk definitely in terms of his squad makeup and his style of play. He was basically at Leverkusen, he played the formation that Chelsea have been playing the last couple of games. So it was a back three, kind of a 3-4-2-1 with two kind of narrow number 10s behind the striker. And on paper, that could really suit a lot of this Chelsea squad. As we know, something like Colwell as a centre-back is imperious, could be really, really well suited to him. Someone like Hatto, of course, at left centre-back, we've seen how good he could be there. You're kind of looking at that thinking, yeah, go and get a really good, experienced right-sided centre-half to play on the right of that three, and you've got something potentially really, really good. Does he look at Cole Palmer and think, I know what I did with Wirtz in Leverkusen and the spaces that I put him in, and I can do that for you. Again, with those narrow 10s, you're looking at your Estevals and your Enzo Fernandez and thinking, yeah, that could really suit them as well. So there's quite a lot of players in the squad that I think if Chelsea went down that route and stayed in that formation, it could really suit them. The reason I'm a little bit reluctant, and we probably will end up talking about it, is that this is so often done with managers, and actually so often the case that they're not stuck to one formation. The top managers will come in, have a look at their squad, have a look at the league as well, in the Premier League, and he might come in and immediately play a back four, and it'd be a very, very different shape. But certainly, you go into look under the squad planning for next season and think, as I said, Joe and I will do this and look, well, there's actually a blank slate for everyone now. And does he look at someone like a Nicholas Jackson, for example, and think, actually, yeah, I think I could do stuff with him alongside a João Pedro. That could be quite an interesting kind of dynamic to have in my strikers and all these kind of things. So yeah, it's just such an exciting appointment. As you can hear in my voice, I'm so happy. And Chelsea, it's been so negative in the last couple of months. It's amazing what the right appointment can do to give you a whole perspective of positivity, a massive shift. And certainly now, in all the kind of preview into next season now, I'm kind of like looking forward to it again, if that makes sense. Kind of done with this season. I think most of us are. Who knows where we'll finish? I think I saw today we can finish anywhere from 7th to 13th, depending on how the final games go. So anything could happen. I think the question I'll put out there into the crowd and the group, and again, would love people's feedback on email. You can email us at hello@1905podcast.com, is would you rather play in the Europa League next season or not be in Europe at all? And I can kind of see a good argument either way. I think the argument for being in Europe still is, it's still a good European competition. Obviously, if you win the Europa League, you're going to get in the Champions League and you're going to make a bit of money, and it's a decent experience and potentially good chance to play some of the younger players and some of the easier games in the Europa League as well. On the other hand, do you look at it and go a little bit Conte 16, 17 and basically something that Carrick's benefited of this season at United, and think Alonso having, most weeks a full week on the training pitch with his squad to kind of really give time and build up to each Premier League game. And is that where you'd actually think the better time and would be spent? And I'll give my vote. I'd go no Europe. I think I'd go don't be in Europe at all. Go with those benefits. Probably go into the season with a slightly slimmer squad. So you can quite easily then say, yeah, we don't need Badiashile, we don't need Tosin, we don't need Disassi, etc. And if you do need an extra centre back, we can bring someone in from the youth team and kind of go in with a slightly lighter squad. Whereas if you're in Europe, there's always a temptation to sort of bloat it out for the B squad, as we saw in the Conference League last year. The other thing is, of course, Chelsea could get in the Conference League, and then it's a different question of what they do. My gut feeling is, based on nothing apart from rumours, is that Chelsea would not enter and would basically say, no, we don't want to enter the competition, because I think it costs you more money than it does and that you make to be in that competition. And obviously Chelsea won it 2 years ago. It was a weird but interesting run, and we completed the set, which is a nice moment for us, but I don't think we need to be in that again, do we? So yeah, I'll hand over to Joe for his thoughts on Alonso, but absolutely buzzing with it. Still can't quite believe that we pulled it off. Wasn't going to believe it until I saw it announced, and when the official communication came through earlier, I was so happy. So yeah, welcome to the club, Xabi Alonso. You've got a big job to do, but I have faith.
He who shall not be named, Xabi Alonso. Yes, he is the new manager of Chelsea Football Club. And I think I align with Chris in every way with what he said. I don't disagree with any of it. I think he's given a really reasoned argument as to why he could be the guy for Chelsea. I think there is an element to being a Chelsea manager that does give you a little bit of kudos with the fans. And I think there is a certain style, a certain look, a certain way you have to be with the media. And I think Alonso certainly at this stage looks like he ticks the boxes. And I don't want to get too carried away because we've been down this road before. But as I said in the last podcast, you won't hear any moaning and groaning from me. I think if it's going poorly and it's not quite going to plan at the start, I think what this season alone has taught me is that even up to a couple of weeks ago, we could have still made the Champions League. And we've had one of the worst seasons that I can really remember, particularly in the modern era of the Premier League. So, yeah, incredible to think that even as poor as we've been this year, that we could have snuck in. And I think that we must all remember that going into next year, even if it's a poor start or maybe have a good start and a slow middle, things can always be rectified, and a few good wins here and there can certainly put you in the driver's seat. As for his contract, it's a 4-year contract. So I'd say a very sensible thing to do. There's no 7-year contract, or in the case of Pochettino, a 1+1 if you do all right type thing. So I think they've certainly nailed the brief when it comes to that side of things. I'm sure the sporting directors and the ownership group would have been more happy to have announced this yesterday. Having won the cup, they might have said, hey, look, guys, it was a bad season, but we won the FA Cup. And you've got this shiny new manager who we think you're all going to love. I think they would have loved to have done that. I think the fact that we didn't and Alonso's still coming is clearly a great thing. Having listened to quite a bit about him today, I think you get a good feel of a guy. Sky Sports seem very keen to be doing pieces about him. TNT. There've been lots on social media. I would say the general consensus is that Chelsea have done a good thing here. There's lots of Bayern Munich journalists who were out for the parade, I think, for Bayern Munich today, winning their league title. And there seemed to be a very, I'd say, not a large proportion, but I'd say everyone they spoke to seemed to be very keen on Alonso and said that, Chelsea generally across the board always have good players and good teams. If you've got no one at the helm who is competent, then all these things, then, they run aground. So, it was great to hear from them, and they seemed very chipper on the fact that Chelsea had signed him, and almost a bit disappointed that maybe he wouldn't be going to them, even though they don't really need him right at this moment in time. But I think that it's a superb appointment from an outsider's perspective, which is kind of giving me more trust in Alonso, even though he's not even kicked a ball in anger yet. I think with my friends, it does seem to be very much, well, how did he get in? Like, that's a good one. Like, I can't believe that you've managed to pull that off, considering where you are and how you've been doing. And yeah, I always like that when I think that other teams suddenly feel a little bit almost scared is perhaps a strong word, but certainly an air of pondering on their part, wondering if that suddenly Chelsea might be a force. Now, I'm not going to come on here and say we are or we aren't. I'm too long in the tooth for that, but I think that what it has done is given me that little bit of confidence that maybe Alonso, could be the guy. And I do hope that he can get hold of that dressing room next season from the off and, lay down his markers and say, this is me, this is what I want to do, and this is where I want to go. And if you don't want to be here, then there's the door. If you do want to be here, then come and learn something, and we'll try and put a team together. Like Chris, I always like Chelsea in a back three. I always have done. I know there are pundits out there that say that if you play a back three, it means you can't defend properly. And I think in some teams that's probably fair. I think that Chelsea have won the Premier League playing a back three. I don't think that means you're a bad team if you're in the Premier League. So we'll watch that space in terms of his formations. I think what it has done, and what this new kind of formation that Callum Holland stumbled upon, is that even in a back three, you don't have to play in the back three all of the time. And as we saw yesterday with Jiro Hato running the length of the field and should have had a penalty more than likely in the second half, it goes to show you that you don't need to not have the extra attacker if you do play a back three. So yeah, there's ways around it. And I think the general kind of rule is that you lose an attacking player when you play a back three, which kind of is the case. But if you can have some very good wingers, if you imagine Reece James in a wing back role, I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to play there, but if you imagine him doing that, if he was all fit and well and there was no injuries, to have Reece, let's just say, 50 yards up the field further than he would normally be at right back, I'd much rather that than him playing, say, a Paulo Ferreira, for example, who played right back for Chelsea under Jose Mourinho, and he never crossed the halfway line. So there are ways around it. If you can get your good attacking defenders up the field and into the key areas, I think that a back three can work rather nicely. So yeah, there's pros and cons to all these formations, and I think that as long as Chelsea are prepared to maybe mix it up for certain games, and I think what I have heard about Alonso is that he's prepared to change formation mid-game, and if something's not quite working out for him, he's prepared to juggle things around and not just sit and play the same way. Or under Maresca, you can see things not working, but we continue to do the same thing over and over and over again and get the same result. And it's like, come on, leaving Rosenior too, to some degree, didn't really change things once he got a set pattern of play, and it was like, okay, we're going to keep doing this. And yeah, I want my manager to be someone that goes, you know what, today we've tried what we're doing, but it's not coming off, so we will change to a back four, or do you know what, we will go to a back three, but it'll be slightly more defensive. Or yeah, there are ways around things, and I just think that on certain days, some teams just play better, and a team that haven't won all season long might end up coming to the bridge and at half time are suddenly 1-0 up against you, and you're thinking to yourself, oh bloody hell, I wasn't expecting this. And at half time, Alonso goes, do you know what, we're going to scrap that, we're going to go to a 4-4-2 or a 4-4-1-1, opposed to just banging your head against a brick wall, because teams have watched you for 10 weeks now and they kind of got an idea of how you're playing, and you're easy to play against. So I think I like the idea that Alonso's prepared to change. He officially takes over on July the 1st, but I would expect him to be involved in any transfer plans prior to that, whether that's players being let go or come into the club. I would expect him to sit down with the players at some point and have a conversation with certain individuals, or even if it's not with the players, with the sporting directors or the owners, and saying, well, look, this guy can go, they're probably not going to be in my plans. That is exciting in itself. But like I say, he won't officially take over until the 1st of July. So we have most of the World Cup to go through before he joins the club. But I think the World Cup's a hard one, because I look at the England team when I go, one of my favourite managers of all time is managing England. And that just frustrates me the most, because I love Thomas Tuchel. So watching them can be a little bit depressing at times. And I find World Cups and European Championships quite hard to get into. I love watching the games. I do love watching the games, but I think there's just so much pressure on England to win. It's almost like easier to watch Brazil versus Croatia or something, because it doesn't really mean a lot to me. But Alonso will be hopefully keeping a keen eye on the World Cup and seeing what's going on over there. But I'm sure, do you know what? I think Chelsea's biggest issue is at home and the outgoings. I think once we can get our head around that, and we can kind of clear the decks slightly again, which just sounds mad to do, because we seem to clear the decks every single season and we're still left with a lot of crap. So hopefully this time he's a grown up and he knows what he wants, and we can maybe get rid of what we don't need and bring in 3 or 4 really competent players. I think if you look at Levi Colwill, and in 2 matches, the difference he's made to our back 3, back 4 has been remarkable. And again, the cliche feels like a new signing, but if you imagine him coming into this team, it really does. So 3 or 4 players around him, and hopefully a much more engaged Caicedo, Enzo, Palmer, etc. There are some good players at the club, and fingers crossed we can develop off the back of it. And even though they've somewhat underperformed this year, we can't deny that if Cole Palmer, Enzo and Caicedo, for example, left the football club, what sort of state we'd be in. You know, we do need to keep hold of our best players where we can. And I think even though Enzo has frustrated a few people since he joined the club, I think there's no doubt that this season he's been a marked improvement on his previous seasons in terms of his goals scored and creativity, and his general performances, I think, have got better. And yes, he's a bit of an enigma, because there are times where you go, bloody hell, he's poor, really poor today. And there's other times you're like, oh, he's brilliant. So I don't know where I sit with Enzo, but given the right players around him, I think he will be a real asset for the team. So here's hoping we can keep hold of him. And Chelsea simply cannot rip up the entire squad and, you know, sell Cole Palmer and sell Caicedo and try and replace these players. It's not going to happen. So we need to keep them on side, keep them friendly, keep them believing that the club is actually going somewhere. And I think next season is going to be huge, because if Chelsea flop next season, I think the likes of Cole Palmer will definitely kick up a fuss. And we haven't got a big window here to get players back and performing to the highest possible level. And I think it starts from now. If it doesn't start from now, we're going to be in big trouble. So Xabi Alonso, you've got a lot of work to do. You have an enormous task on your hands of turning this bunch of absolute bellends into some kind of tangible team next season, and something that we can all get behind and actually cheer again, because this year has been nothing short of an absolute disaster. So hopefully you're the man for the job. I do hope that you can revitalise these players, get us back into the Champions League, where I think we deserve to be, and be amongst Europe's elite and actually compete against the big boys, and not have our pants pulled down like PSG did to us this season. So yeah, here's hoping. I'm very pleased with the appointment. Disappointed with the game yesterday still. It's still fresh in my mind. I can't help that. It is still nagging me slightly, even though I knew we were slight underdogs. But maybe, just maybe, Xabi Alonso can be the man to end the Wembley hoodoo next season. Wouldn't that be nice? A League Cup or an FA Cup. Just got to get that stigma away from not winning at Wembley off our backs. And you know what? Everything might just be all right. Cheers, guys.
To round us out this week, we're going to hear from friend of the show, Declan, with his view on the game on Saturday, and a reminder of what really needs to be done this summer in terms of that squad. So yeah, over to you, Declan, and we'll be back after that Spurs game midweek to reflect and look forward to the final game of the Premier League season.
I'll attempt to keep this short and sweet. 3 key points I think I take from the game. Firstly, Chelsea played well. Couldn't really point fingers at any real glaring issues. No horrific moments. I think the City goal was actually probably the first time we'd actually lost our shape up to that point, which is a bit disappointing, but it's the way it goes at that level against top teams. But yeah, I think I by and large played fairly well. I thought Colwell was excellent. I thought there's some other decent performances, but I think by and large a solid performance from everyone. That said, I think the two other key points I'd make are we need to take our chances. We didn't. How many times Malo Gusto got the ball and did a nothing cross when he should have just carried it into the box? How many times we dilly-dallied on the break and didn't really go for the jugular, I think, at fear about City? How many times we just lacked that final bit of quality that I think would have been really... I think we could have done it. I think we could have done it after the first 15 minutes and up until the City goal. Certainly the 5 minutes before the City goal, we were in the ascendancy. We were probably the most threatening team. And yeah, real opportunity missed there. And I guess the other two key points I'd make are we need a top coach. We need a coach that can actually coach those attacking passages of play. How many times did Chelsea get the ball up front and there was no real plan? City always got a plan. You can see City as soon as Doku gets the ball, O'Reilly knows where to go, Haaland knows where to go. We just didn't have that. It was all individual stuff as usual. We've really missed that. We really need that, and hopefully whoever comes in next can instill that in them pretty quickly, because they are good players. And the third and final point, if I can remember it, well, first of all, I think that we should have definitely had one of those as penalties. I think the final point is just, once the first 11 is exhausted, and once we turn to the subs bench, the drop-off is insane. Cherky comes on for them. They had Foden on the bench. Kova comes on and gives them a different dynamic. As soon as we started taking our players off, the quality dropped dramatically. Neto was busy but didn't really do much. Delap appalling. Garnacho appalling. The quality drop-off when you get away from that first 11, particularly given that Lavia, again, not on the bench, so who knows what's happening there, is huge. And we need to address that. We need to sort that out, get rid of the deadwood and get some players in who can actually do something off the bench. Very disappointing. Don't want to dwell too much on it. But I guess some green shoots of recovery for next season. And it's great to see Colwell back as an imperious centre-back. And how we didn't get a penalty, particularly that second one on Hato. I mean, Kozlov and City are very lucky there.
Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be alright.